When starts the recording?
Okay, I was just about to ask.
I'll go ahead and call to order the workshop meeting, special meeting for Monterey County LAFCO. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ruth Askew,
She's here.
there she is. Commissioner Bickle. Commissioner Leffel,
Here.
Commissioner Church,
I'm here.
Commissioner Poitras,
Here.
On my seat there.
Commissioner Oglesby,
Yeah. You want to say?
Sure.
Commissioner Velasquez,
Oh, that's not.
Commissioner Velasquez, Commissioner Kong,
Here.
thank you.
Yeah, but not.
You're the only one.
Over here.
Commissioner Leffel,
Here.
Did
Vice
you?
Chair Craig,
You
and
heard
Chair
Mary
Gorley.
Ann. Yeah.
And Chair Gorley. Chair Gorley,
Yes.
we have a quorum.
We do.
We'll salute Supervisor Chris Lopez.
Go, Gus.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our workshop. We'll receive a report from our executive officer.
Yes, thank you, Chair Gorley and members of the commission. We are here today to conduct a workshop regarding LAFCO's adopted policy concerning agricultural preservation, and also to consider policy implementation guidelines for that policy. And today the report, our staff report, will be provided by Principal and Analyst Darren McBain.
Thank you, Kate. I'd be happy to go ahead and make a few remarks. I think our chair was going to make some introductory.
You bet I am.
Oh, yes.
You betcha. I'm gonna back up one step here. The basic concept for today, it's a commission workshop with input from staff, local agencies, and members of the public. The goals of the workshop: receive information from staff, local agencies, members from the public on ag preservation and mitigation. Review and discuss LAFCO's policies and practices for cities' annexations of farmland, along with other approaches and perspectives. Provide direction on a set of policy implementation guidelines for how LAFCO will carry out agriculture mitigation going forward. Recognition and acknowledgement of the public agency representatives, private organizations, and individual members of the public here in the room today and on Zoom who have given their time and energy to bring a range of perspectives into this discussion. Our workshop format. After getting a brief overview from staff and receiving public input, staff and I will be asking commissioners to go step by step through a review of LAFCO's policies and a menu of options on how to implement that policy. The goal is to create a set of policy implementation guidelines that would apply to the city's annexations of farmland in the future. We look forward to hearing from everyone today. The agenda includes a dedicated comment period for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. But commissioners will also be able to ask questions of the public later in the agenda for clarification and discuss the progress. Following a robust discussion, the intention is for the commission to be able to take action today on any decisions or changes the commission may come to an agreement on. You see, we have waters and such behind us, so it's workshop atmosphere, so please join us with the beverages and such. We're gonna try to end by 4:30. We have a closed session that we have to get to. And so if we decide to continue this workshop, we certainly can. If we wanna make a decision today, we can. We can forward it for clarification for staff to bring something back at our next meeting, or we can get it all done today in this platform. So it's the gamut is wide open for what we want to accomplish as a LAFCO board today. Let's go ahead and get started, and I'll pass it off to Darren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome and greetings to you, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission, and everybody who's joining us here from the agencies and individual members of the public today. As Chair Gorley stated, one of the main recommendations for today is for the Commission to provide input and direction on a set of policy implementation guidelines to guide
Hey Siri.
Yeah, it went by too quickly though. Yes.
You know, I just kind of went.
in 2005.
The only
we have to retain land and support our ag industry and provide those opportunities for their for for them to grow and expand and have the supportive services. So we really advocate for those exemptions to be incorporated into policy, as well as really understanding and providing clarity as to the role of our city MOUs in this policy. Each city has entered into an MOU, a memorandum of agreement with the county, which outlines our direction of growth and in many cases establishes specific mitigation or requirements for ag preservation. And we really feel that between the MOUs as well as the environmental mitigations that are identified should be a foundation that LAFCO should look at and not add on to in terms of their policy and thank you. This is
Good afternoon, Chair Gurley and the rest of the commissioners. Carmen Gill, City of Gonzales City Manager. First of all, again, thank you all for having the workshop and listening to our opinions on the matters in front of you today. As you're aware, the City of Gonzales has been working on a project that will be coming before you next year. That project includes much needed affordable housing for our community. Per our county MOA, we have established an ag mitigation program that has been years in the making, and our council has adopted it earlier this year. And hopes that LAFCO will allow us to rely on it as we move forward with that project and others to come. When we come before you, we will have a full package drawn out and for your consideration. It will include the specific plan, the development agreement, an EIR tentative map, conditions of approval, and all mitigation measures needed, all pre-approved and in place before you for your consideration next year. In order to meet our housing needs, we need to be able to rely on our negotiated MOA and our city ag mitigation ordinance. You have a letter that references the rest of our recommendations on the matters of timing, ratios, and exemptions in front of you. And we hope that you will consider those as you make your decisions about the policy going forward. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Lopez. I'm a county supervisor. I get to represent South County. It is the privilege of my life to represent the communities that make up all of Southern Monterey County. I wasn't sure how to approach this. I thought I'd listen today and come out with something a little clearer for you, but I thought what I would share today is that in my capacity as a supervisor, I travel to each one of my communities every year. We hold a listening session. It's an opportunity for the public to share with us what is impacting their lives. What are those challenges they see that are hurting them? And I want to share two stories of two women who've come to our sessions and continually voice their concerns. One of them, her name's Lydia. She lives in Chular with her two adult sons. They're both professionals. One's a CPA and one runs a tax service, but they still live with her in their mid-30s because they love Chular. They are not leaving Chular. They want housing in Chular. And she repeats to me every time I see her, where's the housing? Let's get it done. The second story is the story of Imelda. She's a woman who lived in Greenfield. She's now left the Salinas Valley, but she came to a session 3 years ago. She lived in a house with 4 other families, 5 total under one roof. She had 3 daughters. They lived in a living room together. And every night, the only way to access the bathroom was through that living room. She came to me with a cry. She said, I'm hearing voices and I need help. She was hearing voices because she didn't sleep, because she was afraid for her daughters, because all those other people had to cross through that living room to get to the restroom. So she just slept with one eye open. It took a toll on her mental health. I give you that as the human aspect, because as we sit here today and talk about policies and talk about numbers and talk about mitigations, at the end of the day, I heard the policy is working. The policy is not working. It's not working for our communities. It's not working for the people I represent. They are hurting. They're suffering. And every single one of those sessions I attend, I hear it clearly. The biggest need is housing. And I get the desire to say, oh, there's acres and units. But as Mayor Rio said, it's a balance. There's all the pieces that have to be kept up in the air for it to work for a developer. There's those needs for us in the valley to have what we do respected, which is to grow the crops. But we're having this meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when those people aren't able to be here. Those people being my residents, we're not even accessible via Zoom today. It's a real challenge. And even if we had the internet, a lot of them don't have access to the internet. I'm being frank here because at the end of the day, the decisions you make are going to have impacts on real lives. Lives of the people that I'm very fortunate to represent and who have one call. It's the reason I've been put into office, is to bring housing forward. I took a vote here last year in December on housing, and I was hoping to see more progress, but unfortunately, we sit here today much in the same position. When I was a member of this board, we called together for that housing, and yet the needle has not moved. So solutions, some thoughts for you. We're not one size fits all. The situation for King City, Greenfield, Soledad, Gonzalez, and even Salinas are all very unique and different. Consider the appointment of a committee that takes up these questions. I get the desire to have a singular policy, but every community is different, and the ghost of Louis Calcagno looms large. He has set up great boundaries around some of our cities, but as we talk about economics, the economics of wanting to put every mitigation piece up against the city boundary, those people know now what that value is worth, and they will demand more for those pieces. They become more desirable over time. It is a real challenge to make that the offset. So as we move forward, consider that one size does not fit all in the Salinas Valley. It doesn't fit. One size does not fit all in Monterey County. And we need you to help come to a solution that fits all of our communities. It's a challenge. Yes, you're capable. We'll be considering similar challenges at the Board of Supervisors soon. But at the end of the day, it's about solutions. And I want you to keep in mind Imelda and Lydia. I want you to keep in mind their families, the people in this valley who have one call to every one of us in whatever capacity you may sit in, which is help solve the biggest problem of our generation, which is housing us, because we all deserve that. And out of respect for the process and my colleagues on this board, that I just want to share that I'll be stepping out of the room just because having 3 supervisors in the room at any time can lead to questions. I don't want there to be questions. I want your process to be pure. But in that, I hope that you'll keep us in mind, give us flexibility, give us one size, don't fit all assurances that you will consider us. Because as I look around the table at the voting members, I see one from South Monterey County where the future growth is. And that's a tough thing for me to see. And I hope that you'll keep us all in mind as you make those decisions as you are charged. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Pace, and I'm the manager of Pembroke Development. We are the developers of the 770-acre Vistacea project in Gonzales. We have been working with the city of Gonzales for 22 years to make this project a reality. We have submitted several documents to the commission with some specific recommendations on changes that we think should be made in the ag mitigation policy. The reality of it is, calling this the ag mitigation policy is somewhat of a misnomer because it's much broader than that. It also directly impacts several other public objectives that are intertwined and cannot be separated. They are land preservation, housing needs, RENA mandates. Incidentally, our Vistacea project would probably represent over 80% of the RENA requirements for the city of Gonzales. But the policy seems to be working for land preservation, and that's a positive. But it clearly is not working for the housing needs or the RENA mandates. It just is not working. The current policy is built on what I would say was a subjective premise And I read this in the staff report. This is the way we've always done it, so it must be the best way. So therefore, why should we change it? I found that somewhat disturbing. I think that based on that belief system, I think you need to include some disruptive discussion on this policy. I mean, really disruptive discussion. And I would appreciate it if you would do that when you get to that point. We also need to remember that mandates from Sacramento do not create a single home, not one. Only land developers like us who get the land ready and builders who build the homes can do that, not mandates. The easement policy, the objective should not be to create easements. The objective should be to handle the three basic public requirements that I just mentioned, include housing and the arena requirements. It's not just to create easements. From our standpoint, with 770 acres, I would say it's physically impossible for us on a one-to-one basis to find 770 acres of equivalent land. If it goes to a 2-to-1 ratio, 1,540 acres. It just is not going to happen. That's an impossibility. Also financially, it's an impossibility. No developer, not us, no developer in this state is going to come to Gonzales in this case and put up 10 to 20. Pardon?
You're 3 minutes up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Morgan. I'm the president of Chispa Housing, and I recognize a few of the faces here. I really am here to listen mostly about what this LAFCO process means, but I also want to communicate a few things from my own experience about over 20 years in the development of affordable housing. Time is everything. The timing has gotten longer. It used to take a few years, 2 or 3 years, to develop affordable housing. Now it can take 10, 6, or we heard 22. In addition to that, anything that's done to reduce risk, and that can be things like if we have fees, because as a nonprofit, we don't have a whole ton of money that we can just put towards investment, but we have something to help us with designs that really helps. So the in lieu fees do help us. Donations of land make us more competitive for financing all around the state. This week, I think we'll be blessed to move in some of our first residents to Alfred Diaz Infante Apartments. We have 66 families that I'm proud to say that we'll house. And we have 1,800 applications that we've accepted to review. The crisis is real. The only thing I would add to that is that if there are deals or agreements that have been made, MOUs, you have big opportunities in terms of annexation. There's a need for ag worker housing just as much as there's a need for family housing. There's a need for housing of all kinds. And so I would just encourage balance, but a policy that really helps build more housing. Because I've got another 1,700 families that are not going to be housed at Alfred Diaz Infante Apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it. No, he doesn't speak. Good, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for my voice. I spent Thanksgiving with a 3-year-old. She sat in Grandpa's lap and I got the cold. My name is Mark Del Piero, and I'm currently the CEO for the Ag Land Trust for Monterey County. We'd appreciate it if you would read the letter that's included with the staff report that we prepared. We support the staff recommendation. There are some comments made today that I'd like to respond to. First of all, the Ag Land Trust is not opposed to any project in any of the municipalities. The MOUs that were executed in 2013 and 2014 with the cities are now over a decade old. And if there's a limitation or a failure to produce housing within the context of those MOUs, it's not because of farmland preservation, nor because of this policy. LAFCO's obligations now are very clear. These are legal requirements. CEQA obligates LAFCO at the time that a discretionary decision is made, decide what that mitigation is going to be if you're going to be converting prime farmland. It's really that simple. There's case law that's established very much as well that indicates that. In the case of the Ag Land Trust, we were organized in 1984. And as of March, we will have permanently preserved, either through fee acquisitions or easement acquisitions, 50,000 acres in Monterey County. I currently have 13 approved grants that will be completing in the next 18 months. I have 4 more pending that will be decided on the 5th of December that will add another 900 acres in permanent open space easements. And we have 7 that will be filing, one next to the city of Greenfield, one next to the city of Gonzales in June of next year, because the property owners have come to us and are prepared to accept the conservation easement payment from the state that we provide. We strongly recommend your staff's policy recommendations and proposals to you, because that is the balance. The 700 acres of development will be lost for farming purposes. And how the city decides to develop that property is a decision Gonzales will make. Equally true in terms of the city of Soledad, equally true of the city of Greenfield. Those areas within those MOUs will be decided by city council members. And many of the cities don't even have an ag zoning district within their existing zoning ordinances. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is the actual balance, the balancing of allowing hundreds, if not thousands of acres to be developed in favor of balancing the need to preserve some farmland in the Salinas Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Time for one more? Oh, we have plenty of time.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Mike Novo, representing the Ag Land Trust today. I was the author for the county before I retired of all the MOUs in the Salinas Valley, except for the city of Salinas. The letter from the Gonzales developer and their attorney take a lot of the MOU points a little bit out of context. They give you some of the half phrases and not the full context for some of these comments from the MOU. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. The general thing about the MOUs is they first seek, as somebody pointed out, to get conservation easements, along the city boundaries. So that's the priority. The second priority, or one of the other priorities, if you are using in lieu fees to accommodate, because it's infeasible to acquire an easement, that those fees be secured by a bond with the city. So I don't see that as part of the discussion today or in recent times. So I'm hoping that'll get back on the table. Some comments imply that this policy from the letter, that this policy has kept housing from being constructed. And I just don't see any evidence of that. And in fact, on page 24 of your packet, your staff provides a vacant property analysis for the county and shows there's plenty of land available, and almost all that except Miramani has already had its ag mitigation completed. So this is not a constraint to housing production. The developer is threatening to pull out of Gonzales if this policy is not changed, but LAFCO needs to strike a balance here. We can't go fully to the balance of what the developers need as well. We really do need to preserve agriculture, and that's LAFCO's statutory authority. As the city's stated density of 7 units per acre in their specific plan, the current cost for an easement would be about $2,000. And I think your staff does a similar analysis. That's on page 323 of your packet. It's a very long packet. The developer attorney's paragraph on inland mitigation starts with a false premise. It's the current policy of LAFCO is broad enough to allow
in lieu fees that result in easements. And the key here is that result in easements. And that's what our MOUs also talk about. In lieu fees are possible, but they need to result in easements. This is not a paper exercise. We're trying to preserve the ag economy of this county. The MOU allows for payments of in lieu fees as long as I said before, it's secured by a bond. And we're not hearing, or I'm sorry, I already said that. Monterey County has a great ag economy, and ag preservation policies have worked well for over 40 years. We want to keep that balance. We do not support changing such a successful approach. LAFCO needs to retain its authority on this topic, so it's your regulatory role to look at sprawl and ag preservation. Your staff provided you with the full picture, and we support their recommendations. Thank you.
Apparently I'm in charge briefly, so no, by all means, I'm just gonna say the microphone's open by all.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hi, Jeff Scott with Jackson Family Investments. A little bit of a background, take this off. A little bit of a background. We own or operate about 4,500 acres of land in Monterey County. We grow high quality premium wine grapes. We also have about 460 acres in the sphere of influence that was approved in the city of Gonzales back in 2014. I think the key here is just to kind of be a representative for I would say both sides of the coin. Our value in our company is land and people, and we do know that we need this land to create new housing for the community. We've worked with the city for about the same as Glenn, but maybe a little shorter, 15 years plus, developing a general plan, helping them with the general plan, citywide design guidelines. We worked with the city and the county and LAFCO on the sphere of influence approval, provided feedback with the city-county MOA. We've funded several master plans within the community of Gonzales, wastewater, water drainage, and circulation. And we've started working on our first preparation of a specific plan. We also participated in the ag mitigation ordinance with the city. And I guess I just want to be here to say that we support the city's perspective on this. We've worked really hard. It hasn't been an overnight process. It's been a long one. And as folks that own land within the sphere of influence, we are very much in support of the city's ag mitigation ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. Catherine Avila with Avila Construction in Monterey. Wasn't planning on speaking today, but here I am anyways. I'll keep it short and sweet, hopefully. I often work on projects kind of at the intersection of many of the topics discussed today. So specifically agricultural worker housing. So I deal directly with folks in the agricultural business who are looking to provide housing for their employees. So right at the intersection. And I can say this is a really hard topic. The owners I work with are very protective of their lands, very good stewards of their agricultural lands. And I think that's really important to keep in context here, that they have motivation to stay in the business and not sell out all of their land intrinsically by what they do for a living. Often when I'm approached to build housing for them, they say, Catherine, now use as little land as you absolutely can. What can you do to make this tighter and better so we can use less? But they do need to fulfill their need in the worker community. And we're happy to fill that need with apartment style housing. Now, when we look to build housing of any type, not just agricultural worker housing, I often tell people that the impediments are time, money, and risk. Those are the three things. If you can solve for those, you're good. You can build housing. And a policy like this has some challenges to all three of those items. So specifically, as we look in the draft implementation guidelines discussion area 3 regarding exemptions, I would really encourage you to go with option B, which is not currently recommended by staff, but I feel pretty strongly about it. It would save us both on the risk perspective as well as time and money by having some fairly established regulations to include agricultural worker housing, right? That is an ag use, and I'd like to see that exemption clearly spelled out along with affordable housing and agricultural industrial processing plants as well. How much time do I have? Am I good on time? Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then in terms of timing, others have spoken to it. Really important that we delay the timing of monetary impact for mitigation measures until the last possible moment. So presumably when a building permit or a grading permit's issued, it's really hard for us to go years and years or even decades, as someone has implied, having large amounts of money expended without any certainty that a project would move forward. So thank you for your time. Ask you to consider this carefully. I know it's a tight rope to walk.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not too into LAFCO and the whole process of it, but I am learning, as I go, but what all the comments that are really great.
Can I get your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Beatriz Diaz from Greenfield, City of Greenfield. But anyways, the take of what I'm listening is affordable housing. I just wanted to give a little experience in our city of Greenfield, how hard it is for, it's mostly farm working people, so it's hard for them to purchase a home. I have a daughter that, she has a good job, but can't afford a house. I also know some people that live in Greenfield. They're either up to 15 people in the city of Greenfield in a home, so, and they have good jobs, but can't afford a house. So I hope and I pray that you all touch your hearts and do the right thing and get the right policy in there. And let's get some affordable housing for those people that, that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna take a quick break and grab everybody that's been waiting on Zoom to make comments. What's that? Yeah, so if you're, nice, see show a raise of hands, please, for anybody yet to speak on this issue. Just so I know. Who wants to? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to Zoom.
Chair, we have Gabriel Sanders.
You can see.
You unmute, please.
How's it going, folks? My name is Gabriel Sanders. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development for the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. And you've heard from member organizations of MBEP in public comment already. And broadly, what they are saying will be represented in our comments as well. We've been working with the City of Gonzales, City of Soledad, and done our own research around the topics that are at play as it relates to ag mitigation. And simply put, the policy, if not customized for the cities that are hoping to build housing for not just people who can afford large single family homes, but also people who are indeed working in agricultural and in working in a lot of the other industries that power this economy. The 2-to-1 or even 1-to-1 without any modifications for fee impact timing will make it really difficult for housing that is affordable for working class folks to live in those homes that do get built. And it may be the case that housing doesn't get built at all. There is evidence that there is housing that could have been built if not for these policies. However, we do support staff recommendation of continuing to study this topic and making sure that the developments in Vista Lucia, even Miramonte, are taken into account when considering the final policy for agricultural mitigation. This economy is still growing, and it has grown for decades on the labor that people in the valley provide. And I think it's really important to keep in mind this kind of converging set of interests around employment and the employers who need to have a reliable source of labor, and that labor will not be able to stick around long enough or continue growing as the industry needs if the housing for them is not available. Right now, if you're unfamiliar, there's a farm worker study that was published about 4 or 5 years ago that MBEP contributed to that stated that there are extremely high levels of overcrowding, especially among lower income folks, such as those who work in agriculture. And without any expansion in the housing supply, especially a supply that's affordable to them, they will not be able to continue providing their labor. Their health will be at stake, and not just their health or their labor, but just their livelihood, their quality of life. And if there are to be homes for the folks like say even Supervisor Lopez was talking about before. If there are to be homes for the next generation of Salinas Valley residents, people all across unincorporated Monterey and even inside some of the cities where there is agricultural land that could be dedicated to housing to meet RENA goals and to meet the personal goals of these families, please make it as easy as possible for them. If that means taking this to another meeting, so be it. But we support the staff recommendation to continue studying this issue to make sure that it works for the future of the county.
Thank you. Do we have anybody up on Zoom?
Chair, currently, no. Maybe we can make one more ask on Zoom.
Do we have anybody else on Zoom that would, oh, we have a hand raised.
That was Gabe. See chat.
Okay. Anybody else in Zoom would like to comment this afternoon at our workshop?
Mike DeLappa in the chat box is saying he'd like to raise his hand.
Mr. Galapa, could you unmute, please?
I think I'm unmuted. Is that working? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes, we have you.
Okay, great. Mike DeLappa, I'm with Landwatch Monterey County. And we also want to support the staff recommendation. We think it's, thoughtful, and it's important to, understand what has worked and what hasn't worked. And the policy to date has worked pretty well. I did want to address this mythology that land limits housing starts in Monterey County. I hear that quite often. And then I ask people, well, why are there 21,000 approved and unbuilt housing units in the county and 13,000 more in the pipeline? And I think that the economic reality in a county where people, the average household makes $82,000 and the median household price is $1 million, there's just an obvious disconnect. And unfortunately, most of the housing that has been approved and continues to be proposed is single family housing, large, either low density, medium density, even some of the high density single family housing is just off the charts expensive for people that are working in our community. And we really, need to dispel this idea that if we have more housing and more single family homes, we're going to somehow magically create workforce housing for people making 82,000. It's just not going to happen. And I think it's unfair to put the burden on agricultural mitigation and, the very minor costs that these impose compared to the basic fundamental economic disconnect between housing price and the cost of building and the tremendous amount of housing we have that just isn't being constructed. So I, again, Landwatch supports the Landwatch or the LAFCO staff recommendation. And we hope that people who want to see housing built will advocate for higher density homes, particularly multifamily homes within existing city boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else?
Do not see any hands raised. I'll check the chat.
Anyone else in the room want to speak? Let's bring it back to our little workshop between the commissioners here. Who wants to start off? Darren, did you want to add?
If I could just make just sort of like a kind of a housekeeping or clarification on a suggestion on how we might want to run the rest of the workshop, Mr. Chair. I would just suggest that for item 4, which is where we are on the agenda, staff's recommended approach would be to see if we can get general consensus on each of the items or each of the discussion areas and the topics within those discussion areas, an attachment to the menu of options, if you will, for inclusion in the policy implementation guidelines. So staff would suggest that we see if we can get general consensus, actually first on discussion of the policy. And then secondly, general consensus on each of the discussion areas and topics before we proceed on to the next item for consideration.
So through the chair, I thought the commissioner had a question, so you asked for during life, maybe he had a thought, so.
I didn't.
No, it's because he got cut off.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to clarify something. So, I mean, the way to understand this is the cost of mitigation that we're talking about is somewhere around the $2,000 per unit. And once you kind of extrapolate it through the communities.
Does anybody have an actual calculation there?
Yeah, so we've, staff has estimated that, with the understanding, the most recent information that we've been hearing is that the cost of acquiring a conservation easement on prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance is approximately $15,000 to $20,000 per acre. And if you look at typical single family densities of about 8 to 10 units per acre, and just kind of do some simple, a simple breakdown there, we seem to be looking at approximately $1,500 to $2,500 an acre, somewhere in that approximate
A household.
per unit. I'm sorry, yeah, not per acre, per unit. And of course, if it were higher density than that, that would translate to, if it's higher density, that would be a lower cost per unit. And if it's lower density, that would be a higher cost per unit. But looking at these typical single family densities of about 8 to 10 units per acre, yeah, you'd be somewhere in that $1,500 to $2,500 range, just for kind of estimating purposes, rough back of the envelope kind of purposes.
Thank you. Mike, did you have anything?
Well, I mean, from that kind of perspective, I don't think it's within LAFCO's ability to provide or approve affordable housing. I mean, that's not a cost that's really going to make or break, a home to be affordable at that point. I mean, what's an apartment nowadays? I think it's about $300,000 to $350,000 a door, basically, to get an apartment up. Maybe more. Yeah. $1,000 a door. Get in there, but that 1,500 for a unit, which would probably be more like an apartment cost. You're talking about 0.5%. It's not really going to provide affordable housing, even if LAFCO were to suggest, oh, we're just going to get rid of mitigation entirely in the interest of affordable housing. Because I know there's a lot of concern that was brought up by the community about the affordable aspect of it. The other thing that I heard repeatedly was the timing. I don't know if that's something that maybe is a little more within our power to try and help facilitate development in the area. It's the timing of that mitigation without losing complete control over it, because I know that's the other concern.
Okay. If we spin off here and try to stay with what Darren and Kate have put to us in this roundtable discussion, is staying on with the policy. Does anybody have any comments just directly with where we are with our existing policy, or suggestions to move the policy or change the existing policy? Can we stay with that discussion here for a second?
And just to, if I may, clarify and help the chair a bit here. If the commission and members of the public could please turn to attachment 1.0 in your packet. That is the adopted policy that's under discussion here. So I think the idea is that in terms of staff recommendation, that the commission informally today provide consensus that the policy itself is all right. It has been discussed at this meeting and yet prior meetings that this policy provides for a great degree of flexibility on the part of the commission to require mitigation, to not require mitigation. It doesn't set limits, it doesn't set parameters. It's very aspirational in nature. So this is the first item for your discussion, please.
For the chair.
Yes.
So I think we need to update the policy. Let's be really direct about that. I think that while the current policy, which was adopted in 2010, certainly leaves a lot of flexibility, it also leaves a lot of misinterpretation and a lot of inflexibility when it comes to how LAFCO performs when we have cities coming forward asking for very clear direction. I think that is universally what all public comment has asked us for. It might be slightly different, people might have very different opinions about it, but I think it's incumbent upon us to set some policy in place. And frankly, from 2010 to 2023, the housing requirements of these cities has changed dramatically. And I think now is the time to address each one of those. And I am disappointed, actually, I'll just acknowledge that I'm disappointed that we have a time limit for this workshop. I think this is a much bigger discussion. I'm not sure if we're gonna get it done in the next 1 hour. But I do think it would make sense for us to go through each and every one of the discussion points that is being asked of us, the timing of compliance, the mitigation ratio, to ensure that we can find some level of consensus. And if that means we don't get through all of it in the next hour, it means that we set another meeting to continue the discussion. I will just acknowledge, and this is a sidebar, but while I have the floor and through the chair, there's a lot of discussion about the acreage, the land that has already been approved or annexed into city limits. I think there was it's that big thing over there. It says that there's 5,000 acres that have been annexed to the city with mitigation already in place. 2,700 of those acres are in the city of Salinas, and it's the future growth area, which has been in litigation with the school districts for many, many years. So well, not ironically, but fortunately, I'll say, that has come to a conclusion in court and within the last couple of weeks. And so Santa Rita School District and LaSalle School District both got rulings on it, and the city can move forward with building at this point. So just to acknowledge that 2,700 acres out of those 5,000 have been tied up in litigation for many, many years.
Thank you. So do you want to take on the first draft, discussion area 1 in under our second attachment 2? Discussion area 1, timing of implementing ag mitigation requirements. So can we start off with that discussion?
Well, I guess I'm curious, what would you change in this policy?
And create more specific guidelines to give a blueprint to cities. I mean, one of the public speakers said, one of the difficulties is the city has very clear guidelines with the developer, but they're unable to determine what LAFCO's plan is. And it might be determinate upon either the executive director who sits in on that meeting or the board who, creates that policy. But I think now is the time to go through each one of these areas that this entire room is asking us to address and figure out where LAFCO stands on some of these issues.
Okay, so my question would be, the policy, as I understand it, is like, this is like the framework by which we then have those other conversations. And so in order to have those other conversations, we need to say, like, does this policy generally, I mean, when I'm reading it, it's general, it's broad, and also we can then give more specifics, but from a guideline, from like a buffer edges, this is within what we're talking, this is the legal required duty that we have. And I agree that I hear the cities asking for more specifics, and I think we can hopefully provide some of that. But to start that conversation, if there's anything that we fundamentally disagree about just written in here, I think that would be helpful for me to know. Because I think that what's written here, it doesn't lock us into anything. We can lock ourselves into something, in the further discussions that we have on the specific items, from the practices or procedures or, guidelines. But from a policy, I think this is fair and reasonable.
through the chair, that makes sense. You can do it before or after. If it's so generalized, then we don't need to adopt it before or after. But if their underlying policies are going to change, then we can come back to their umbrella policy. But there's no requirement to adopt it before you get deeper, because it's just so generalized, as we say. So, but it may change if we do the underlying understandings. So that, I'm just saying, you don't need to, just because it's the first one in the list, you need to do it now.
Sure. Wendy, do you want to comment on?
I mean, I think if there's things in this general overriding policy, this is like the umbrella that we're operating within from the way I look at it. And it's helpful for me to say, are we generally in agreement on this? Or are we do we have huge disagreements about the fundamental purpose of why we exist? If that's the case, that would be helpful to know that before we go into more in-depth conversation.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from Kimberly is more specificity, get that word out. And I think that's the only thing I've heard. Mary Ann.
So, I'm the one that started this, I think last May.
Thank you so much.
Said, yeah, when I said, what is this letter to Gonzalez and what is this policy that is quoting that we've got policy that says 2 to 1. That was what started it when we had a letter from our executive director in our April package on a letter that was sent to Gonzalez in March that none of us had seen except a month after it was sent, that we were like, what is this? What is it? So I agree with you, general policy. I totally agree with Mayor Oakley that we need to look at all of these pieces and see if these pieces kind of wrap up into that we look at the full policy. I get Cortese Knox. I've tried to read it thoroughly a few times. It's a little past my 12th grade education. But I believe that we've got to look at some of these things because we seem to have a lot of confusion of what are we telling people when we go out. We've been quoted. We, LAFCO, said, it says in the weekly, we said, we don't know what we said because we didn't say it. So what we're saying is we want some specifics that we know what the rules are, because how do all of these people possibly put together thousands of dollars of documents to give us when they don't know what the rules are? I think that's where we're at. And you know what? You can talk about a unit costs 2,000, 300,000, it costs $1 million. You can talk about all of that, but we are part of the problem if we don't clarify it so that the people cut the time to bring a product to market and that they know what they're doing. Otherwise, the attorneys in the room will sit here and rub their hands in glee because they are going to have a lifetime of work. And we can cut some of that. Nothing against attorneys, I like you all. But we have to make it clear for people. And I think that's our big failing. And we've been operating like, oh, we're LAFCO, but we didn't realize what the LAFCO policy is and how it's interpreted from time to time with our staff, with the community. So we just need to make it we need to make it very clear. So I agree totally. If I just read the policy, yeah, it's fine. But it's the interpretation and all these little pieces in here that I think we have to clean up. And as a body, we have to decide how are we going to implement policy.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for all the comments too that were provided today. I think they're really, it's really helpful. I think we've been hearing some of these comments already in the past couple of conversations that we've had regarding some of the approvals that we've brought before us, especially in terms of the annexation, specifically reference for the city of Soledad. I want to go back to what Commissioner who asked you kind of talked about, and just in looking at this, if we're going to change policy, I would like also to be able to look at what policy, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about, what we say, what we haven't said in the weekly, what we have said or what we haven't said. And so I just want to be clear, and if we're going to be transparent, I think we have to be very honest about our conversation. That's not an easy conversation. But is it policy, there's a policy in item number 2, which is item number 2 on the policy. And section 2 or number 2, which talked about the proposal, that comes forth and it's in the opinion of the executive officer will be incomplete. I know there's been a lot of that discussion, so I just really want to make sure that if we're entertaining these conversations, that we're really honest about what specific items of the policy we are unhappy with, so that way we have a true and honest discussion for us as a commission, but also I think in respect of all of our cities that have been here, and not just our cities, but also all of the residents within our city that deserve for us to be able to come here and really look at what isn't working in the policy and what is working, because I think a lot of the data that the staff has provided to us is that there's flexibility, and within that flexibility, there's a history that we've never gone to a 2. I don't think that I've seen before that there's been a 2-to-2 ratio that has ever been moved forward. So within that, it's been the history that it's been at a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of the mitigation, or 1-to-5. So I want to make sure that we're really being honest about the conversations that we're having and looking at what is it in the policy that we're looking to change, and to be really transparent about that as we move forward with this conversation.
Okay.
I have a question. Along with what you said earlier, Executive Director, I believe you said we have the flexibility not to impose any mitigation at all. And my question is, have we ever not imposed mitigation?
Yes. The
And when,
commission,
what circumstance?
in the early 2000s, there were several annexations that the commission approved that did not include any mitigation. And probably that included a project, City of Gonzales, De Rigo annexation was I would say one of the larger ones, and that was how many acres, Aaron? Probably
About 200 or 300 acres. I don't have that right.
right.
Yeah.
But it's a fairly rare occurrence, I guess.
Yes, and then also I think around 2007 or so, when the city of Salinas future growth area came forward with an annexation, LAFCO did not require any annexation of those roughly how many thousands of acres? 2,700. However, I believe at that time, the city had committed to paying $750 per acre as a mitigation, so almost nothing. But that was an arrangement that had been worked out with the city of Salinas and the county of Monterey, and was accepted by this commission at that point in time. I would say that approximately from 2010 forward, this commission has been consistent in applying mitigation requirements at the time of annexation for every annexation. And generally, the ratios that have been required have averaged out at being approximately 1.5 acres preserved for every 1 acre developed. Only in one of those instances has there been an in lieu fee, and that was for a very small, roughly 30-acre annexation to the city of Greenfield. 100% of the times the commitment has required that the mitigation be satisfied, that is, be implemented at the time of annexation before your staff actually records the annexation. So that is the history of the commission over the last, at least the last 15 years, without exception. That answers that question.
That answers my question, and what I was referring to is really, okay, the document, the policy allows us a lot of room for mitigation, but it doesn't sound like this commission gives much mitigation, at least since 2010. And I'm not saying we should, and I'm not addressing any specific issue, but to say we have a policy that includes the ability to be flexible, if we're not actually treating it as being flexible, then maybe we ought to look at that.
Well, I would say that would be pre-2010. The mitigation was lacked.
But it's been rigid and since 2010 is my point. So the document allows for flexibility, but actually we have. Am I right about that? I think that's right.
Yeah. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, it's right at church.
Yeah, it's like, we've talked about it here. Do we generally agree with this? I think I listen to everybody. I think we're sort of general agreement that this policy is relatively good. But, there's some talk of wanting to refine some of these things. So, if we're really going to get into this, there's no way today we're going to be able to go through all these discussion points. I'm aware of that. But, I myself, I'm generally in favor of the staff recommendations with some tweaking here and there. And Commissioner Bickle points out a real good point is that, in terms of cost, this doesn't affect affordable housing. Because when we talk about housing, that's what we're talking about, affordable housing. And that's really some issues with the counties and the cities, and not just here on how much land is being mitigated out here. The difficulty is, I think some of the commissioners have pointed out, is how speedy can this come about? And for me, I'm not, if we're just going to build houses and build 3,000 square foot houses, we're not helping people in Monterey County. I think with Ms. Diaz there, Mr. Sanders earlier, Supervisor Lopez, what we really want is affordable housing. And there's ways we can tweak this. If it's 100% affordable housing project, maybe you don't need ag land mitigation, because those are the people they're the ones that need the homes. So there is some tweaking we can do perhaps on this. I think there's some tweaking we can do on the in lieu fees. I'm not a big fan of the in lieu fees, but when I listen here from folks talking about them today is, maybe we can delay it off till we actually go and turn ground. Well, land values have gone up. If we're going to approve a project at some point and have it going, maybe those in lieu fees need to be paid to market rate on land. It's going to go up every year. So when they actually start to go to do the work, it's relevant and comparable, because a home is really a lot more expensive than when the project first started 4 or 5 years ago. So they should have the in lieu fees if there's going to have to be a purchase done. So again, I think there's some tweaking we can do on how we can help promote and encourage affordable housing, and not just get caught up here and frankly, the bad policies from the state and the county and the cities over the last 40 years, which I just don't think really have addressed affordable housing, because we don't build small homes, and we need to be able to do ways to encourage them of higher density. And otherwise, you're going to build 3,000 square foot homes, and you're not going to have just 15 people as Ms. Diaz was referring to. You have 25 people in the home. Every family deserves its own place, and that's what we need to kind of encourage as much as we can. I'd like us to get on with some of the specifics, because we're going to come back to this again.
Sure.
Just
Honorable Mayor.
Just a comment to Commissioner Church. Most of the cities that are coming forward today have inclusionary housing ordinances already in place and in new development that they're coming forward on. So when you're talking about affordable housing, that's part of the city's mitigation that they've done to be able to bring forward a housing development plan. I don't know if that's necessarily the will, or I won't say the will of LAFCO, but the responsibility of LAFCO. I want to make sure that we are creating consistent policy to give the city's direction. I think it's the city's responsibility to make sure that there's affordable housing. Now, whether or not we give incentives on, a potential development that is coming forward in one of the cities that's here today, or frankly, any one of the 12 cities, I'll clarify. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of those cities have the inclusionary housing ordinance already in place. So there's already a requirement to even develop.
Yeah, Mayor, just to kind of address that, I didn't bring up the inclusionary housing because I know this is something we're dealing with. That's a whole nother game out there, which I think is just, I can just look at the counties, and the counties is inadequate and poorly written and discourages really affordable housing. I don't know about the cities, maybe they've got great ideas going out here, but you look at at our housing element plan, and we're supposed to be putting 2/3 or 3/4 of these into a low-income housing. And that number's been growing up and up over the years because our inclusionary housing program. plans do not work. So I don't want to get into that or so, but my point is, we can do things here on our responsibilities, not on stuff that we don't even deal with, and encourage affordable housing.
So, Mr. Kim, we're gonna set a framework is what we're doing. We put the frame around it, the cities have to fill in the pieces. I mean, that's
Sure.
the way it is. So if we looked at discussion one, timing of implementing mitigation requirements. But if we just went with just number one, mitigation, do we want to set a mitigation number? And then do we want to give that number exemptions for certain things? Then you give it to the city. They figure out, we're gonna do so much affordable, that's 0.85. We're gonna do.
It's up to them.
That's up to them. So I don't want to keep it, we get into the weeds on some things. I want to be.
That's fine.
Rapid framework.
Do we have a consensus on the policy piece of this?
No, not yet.
No,
Okay,
that's
okay,
what we're talking about,
right.
right? And
Before we get into the other pieces of the exemptions and timing and everything else, let's stay on the policy piece.
I think we're gonna need to get into the, I'm sorry for the chair, I apologize for interrupting. We're gonna need to get into the discussion points in order to determine whether or not the policy needs updating.
I agree with that totally, but I know the policy needs updated. That's why we're here. We didn't come here to stamp off on 2010's policy.
Well, that's what.
I'm agreeing with you. Something has to change, right? We haven't talked about it yet. We've been talking about it for several months. My point is, I think we will have a better understanding of supporting the policy if we knew what was inside. If we knew what was inside under the umbrella. I got the overall arching policy in the umbrella, but what's underneath it? And that may change the concept of it. And it may not, because it's so flexible. Okay, we can just adopt it, that's fine. But I think there's some wording in there that we all want to take a look at. So we can stop talking about, do we want to adopt it? And we can go to the vote. Or we can go to what people want to change in the language.
Okay.
Through the chair.
If we, yeah, we've sat you down already, Tavern, so this is our workshop, our roundtable, we've already asked for comment. Now, if anybody has any questions for the city of Gonzales, they can definitely ask. Mayor.
So just for clarification purposes in terms of our discussion here today and the policies and whatnot, because our policy is flexible though. What I heard earlier was that from 2010 on, we haven't really exercised our discretion in terms of the flexibility of the policy. So as commissioners, we do have that authority to do that, to defer the mitigation, the ag mitigation ratios, and has been deferred into other instances in the past. So I guess again, an understanding of what have we not, and what is where can we, I know legislate what the legislature says in terms of what we're supposed to be doing, but what do we have flexibility with? Because I think that probably would, have a better discussion in terms of timing and some of the ag mitigation ratios. Since the cities, some of the Salinas Valley cities do have the MOUs, and I think for me, it's what do we have discretion and why have we not been exercising it before, and how could we move forward? Given that if we need to change the policy to allow for more of a framework that really has provides the cities with more guidance, but also for us as commissioners, and do we have discretion on timing? Do we have discretion on the ag mitigation ratios, working within the framework of the existing policies?
Yeah. There you go.
So if we said we want 1-to-1, that's what the commission wants. If that's what we said today, we won't have any more that now our average is 1.5. Because 1-to-1 will be that's our standard. That's what we want. And if we say that to all these people in the room, it's 1-to-1. Don't come back from 1.75 or 0.20. We're 1-to-1. That's it. Staff then knows that they can go out and they can say, if you don't bring me 1-to-1, we're not looking at it. that's like, that's what it's gonna be. But when I hear that we've averaged 1.5, I go, there's a problem with the policy, because that means I didn't think David's was very good, so I need him at 0.2 and Pete gets a pass at 0.6. And that's just not working. I don't think that's very fair to the community. It's not fair to anybody that would take the risk to come to this county and see what they're gonna do.
Okay, let's get through these discussion points. Ian, are you?
Well, where do you want to go, Chair? We don't want to.
So the policy, I don't think we're gonna get there on our policy decision. We're not gonna sit here and approve the policy until we get through these discussions on timing and mitigation and all the rest of it. And I think that's the meat of what everybody wants to hear in this room anyway, is where we are with discussion, and we're just gonna put it out there. What is everybody's thought? Just LAFCO Commission on timing, implementing agriculture mitigation requirements. Yes, sir.
I did have an administrative, not administrative, but a legal question that I think will help set that front. My understanding is that I thought legal told us last time, which is we have to remain flexible. We cannot lock in any of these, because that goes to land use policy. And so we can do 1-for-1, but 20 years from now, if every application comes through and it's a minimum 1-for-1, after a while, you start setting policy. I thought that was my understanding of what you offered. If every case, we did the same requirements, no elite fees, always 1-for-1.
So the way that the policy is written, it is sort of the overarching. The word umbrella has been used as a good word for it. It is flexible and it gives this commission discretion to do almost anything you want to in terms of ag mitigation. And so the reason you heard me weigh in on that being a benefit for LAFCO is because as a commission, that gives you guys flexibility. You can make choices that are appropriate for the community, but also there is a prohibition on directly regulating land use. It's written into the language. So rather than saying in a policy, no proposal that any proposal that fails to do a 1-to-1 mitigation is going to be outright rejected. That would likely fall afoul of directly regulating land use. So you have a very flexible policy, and underneath it on this particular topic, you would say, generally speaking, the commission looks to see a 1-to-1 ratio. In cases where there is a beneficial use, such as an affordable housing project, 100% by CHISPA or something like that, we would be very welcoming to a 0 or a much more reduced ratio or a lower in-fee rate or whatever it may be, so that you give general guidance without promises. And that kind of general guidance is sufficient when people have a practice of honoring it. And that's what the commission has to do, is set the guidelines and then get projects in and use that guideline to kind of steer the development to that kind of positive result.
Right. Not what I'm to share is we can do 1-for-1, but we always have to leave ourselves flexibility to say in lieu fees, case by case.
And there could be exemptions.
Yeah, case by
If
case.
we want exemptions. Those are all things that are within our purview to say.
My only thing is, if we're gonna talk about setting a policy, I just don't wanna lead us down a road where we think there's no flexibility because it has to be 1-for-1. That's the only thing I want us to get.
Sure.
Yeah,
Recommended. Yes, sir.
Hey, sorry, Commissioner Church, I'm kind of in your corner here, I always get dry, so I try to speak up, but yeah, I do think you want to listen, there has to be some flexibility though, too, as we were just pointing out. And if, for example, if somebody wanted to cut, was talking about some project that had 5,000 square foot homes on 50 acres, I would say, well, maybe that's a 2-to-1 you need, because that's surely not addressing the people who are working out in those fields that are losing that job, they're not gonna have jobs for that, what had been agricultural that, as opposed to like with CHISPA, as we're saying, maybe it's a, there's no mitigation. I mean, I'm looking at, what are we really trying to do? We're trying to have affordable housing. I hear that from everybody. And that's what we have to encourage. And that's where you need that flexibility, I think.
It's a workshop, go ahead. Okay, thank you. No, I was gonna say, I think what we're looking for is well-planned development, right? And so if the city wants to do that, 3,000 square foot homes,
5,000.
or 5,000, I do think it's a way that we can look at and say, well, then you're taking too much ag land for, you know, something that's really not needed. But I agree to 100%.
I also think too, I would be hard pressed to find a city council in the Salinas Valley that approves 5,000 square foot.
They're all up in the hills in the county.
Something to discuss in the county.
Well, I just. No. The chair as well, if we want to have the conversation about affordable housing, I know obviously this has come up before, but. You know, obviously I understand that there's things that we as a commission are not looking at, but I do want to look at, you know, what are some of those exemptions that we can put in that are within the policy that's existing, that gives us as a commissioners the flexibility when there are projects that come before us that do have those affordability, that are going to be working with a developer like Cheese for like another nonprofit that is going to be providing those affordable homes. And I just want to say in terms of the whole housing conversation, you know, obviously preservation of ag is really important, but we also have about 50,000 farm workers in our community. And I'm going to say this because I'm the daughter of farm workers. And I think growing up in the Salinas Valley, we talk about affordable housing and it's easy to say we're providing that affordable housing. I debated that and it's no secret even in my city. And that I say we want to provide affordable housing. And if you look at majority of the cities, with the exception of Greenfield, because I think they've done a great job, but the RENA numbers that are being developed in terms of the lower affordability for you know our farm workers or for our families that have lower income levels, we're not providing the housing for them in our RENA numbers. So I think that's something that we need to be looking at as well. Is if we're really talking about we're going to give exemptions in terms of affordable housing, is that we really do that. We really have those hard conversations. What does that really mean for some of our community members, and what does affordability really mean? And if we're looking at housing, I think one of my heartaches has been, let's look at how we're providing, providing these annexations, and making sure that we're just, I know the one from Solid obviously was historic because the commission had not approved an annexation of that magnitude. And it's looking at these phases, right? What doesn't work? What does work? How do we make sure that we're providing that affordable housing or that housing that's needed for our communities? And that if we need to phase, because we need to phase out those annexations that are coming that are more, you know, in larger magnitudes that we're looking at, that if we're really truly looking at, everybody's talked about today and even in the comments that it's to provide also the opportunity to develop housing for the people that need it within our communities. So I think it's important for us to also be looking at what policies that we put together, what changes or framework that really truly are going to impact how we and as and cities develop housing that truly is affordable for our residents.
And I think that's next if we can get to your questions, right? Whichever one you guys want to start first.
That's discussion area one, the timing and implementing of ag mitigation requirements. Is everybody there on that? Yes, or number two attachment? Yeah.
Chair, perhaps as we work your way through each of the discussion topics, our staff could just briefly introduce it for you.
Sure, I'd be happy to take a stab at that. Really the basic question here, quite, you know, candidly, just in the interest of time and just kind of getting right to it, is the fundamental question is, does the commission want to keep implementation of ag mitigation requirements within the LAFCO process as a required part of city annexations, which has been the practice or a LAFCO practice since 2000, as Kate was talking about, and particularly you know, a consistent practice since the current policy was adopted in 2010. Or alternatively, does the commission want to essentially, you know, take that implementation role of ag mitigation and you know, and I mean this in a neutral way, but hand it off to the Salinas Valley cities, either wholly or partly, for the cities to implement ag mitigation through their own permitting processes and under their own discretion and oversight after an annexation has been approved and completely finalized, which is what essentially the cities are requesting here today and in the written correspondence you've received. So this is, as we mentioned in the staff report, this is a very fundamental you know, decision point It is a point where LAFCO staff's recommendation does, differ pretty starkly from what the cities are asking for and recommending. But in staff's opinion, this is probably the most fundamental decision point before the commission today.
Wendy?
I have a question.
Yeah.
All right, so there's LAFCOs throughout the state of California. Are there other LAFCOs that have delegated this authority to their cities? Or would this be something that is common practice?
Yes, some other LAFCOs have never taken on that responsibility over the last 50, 60 years. And don't plan to.
Okay.
So it is within the discretion of each LAFCO in each county to decide. And the tradition in this county of Monterey has been that is an important responsibility. It's within the authority of the commission, and so that's our starting point.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess, I can see why, and I hear the cities clearly saying, give us the ability to manage development within our community. I hear that loud and clear. I also recognize that the balancing act that everyone has spoken of, that the cities and the developers are motivated in a certain way that's different than what the motivation or the tasking of LAFCO is. And so I'm not opposed to making changes to this, but I think I would want to make sure that if I look back at other lessons that we've learned, right, when we've had large developments in the county and our cities over the past 20 years, and we've said, okay, developers, you can build the affordable housing at the end of the project. What we learned is that affordable housing never got built. And so having these checks and balances in place, I think the lesson that I learned, if it's not equivalent, but it's still, you need to have someone who's there to say, yeah, no, like we get it, developer, you want to build the most profitable portions first, but we need to make sure that this actually happens. And so I would want there to be, someone mentioned the bond, or some way that that LAFCO remains with some authority to make sure that actual mitigation does happen as it was approved. So just a few quick thoughts.
So I have a question for Kate, then I guess for staff. Sorry.
I understand where other counties may not take that role in ag mitigation, but Monterey County is special when it comes to ag. I mean, we're not just the fourth largest agricultural county in the state of California. We're the fourth largest agricultural county in the country. I mean, this is what drives this economy. This is what brings the jobs, brings money in. With 7 billion a year, I don't know. I lose track after a few billion. It's, we got a lot of money coming in from here, and that's got to remain that way. It's got to remain the engine of this county, and I'm pretty strongly in favor of keeping it in LAFCO, because LAFCO's got people from all around the county, and it has that whole picture, and not just of just one city and the surrounding areas there. And I think we got to keep that picture where ag is, and protect that future through there. So that's where my position is.
Before Mary Ann, I think Ian had something.
Well, okay, yeah, thanks. Just, but how do we tweak it to, we're gonna keep a handle on it, but it needs to be tweaked. I don't think handling somehow, Supervisor Rescue said something about the mitigation with, affordable housing. I don't think that's the same thing, affordable housing mitigation. But how do we keep that encouragement? Because I think that is the state, right? We want to encourage affordable housing. My last point is, I don't think affordable housing or housing should be driving this conversation. It's protection of the private land and developing well-developed community, well-planned communities. But if we're going to keep it, I would like to hear something about what is the stick, what is the encouragement. Otherwise, we we require the so-called mitigations and stuff, and then we look up in 3, 4, 5 years later, nothing's done. So I just want to hear more.
Mary Ann?
So a few things. Number one, the cost of land has gone up considerably in the last 15 years. The cost of everything's gone up. the cost of the fees that all of the cities are charging has gone up. And the districts, everybody's got their hand in the pie, and they always look to the developer to be the goose that's gonna lay that golden egg. I guess a caution and an idea is that every time they take another 100 acres, they have to come back to the commission that they have satisfied certain requirements. It becomes cumbersome, but I'm kind of hearing that's where the commission, some of us might be.
Why
headed.
can't the agreements be made between the landowners and whoever's putting their land into preservation, make the agreement now, but not pay up until the next phase?
That could be.
I don't know, I'm thinking
No,
outside, I'm kind of agreeing with you, and maybe it's too cumbersome, and maybe we need 6 more employees at LAFCO to figure this thing out in 20 years.
I don't think
Because,
it takes 6 more employees, see, that's the easy way out.
but no, let me get to my point. What I'm saying is, are we creating such a cumbersome path forward to make sure that we're tracking all this stuff? Or do we
I don't
just look
think
at
so. If the
some
rules-
software program that gets us there?
I don't think so, because right now, Pete and I both heard Kate say at a special districts meeting that Soledad would have to bring it back for her approval, that she was the ultimate approval source based on the way we're set up now.
Right, and that was per our motion that we made last October.
That was
Yeah,
the
that
one
was-
from last December, that
Right.
when it came to the
Because it came to the commission and we gave her the.
we said what we said, but that the ultimate, they would have to come back and prove to her
Sure.
that they had done that. So I'm just trying to think through this, that if you say, okay, I've got 700 acres I'm annexing, but I may take 100 acres at a time. Then at that 100 acres, they pay, either they have the land to mitigate or they've got the in lieu fee. End of the story. But somebody's then got to say, okay, that's it. We're still not gonna tell them, we wanna have so much open space and so much workforce housing and affordable housing. That's not our business. Unless we say, we'll give you a lesser amount of mitigation in lieu fee if you are doing more affordable, more workforce. I don't know what else, but I think that's what I'm hearing, and that we're kind of, can I finish?
Yeah.
That we're just kind of struggling through. I'm gonna say, this is a caution I say to the cities and the developers, because you know, that was my business, commercial lending. Is that with the cost of things going up and with the changes of paces around the table, it better be pretty ironclad that when you come back for that third 100 acres, whoever's sitting around here doesn't go, whoops, we don't like that anymore, and now we want to have it another way. That is the thing that for me, because then put the risk right back out in the community. I'm trying to figure out how we can get things done in this county, preserve ag land, make housing for everybody. Everybody. And make sure that we're doing it in a fair way, that we bring money to the county, to Mike's opinion. And that brings up a question I have. I just want to make sure that we're doing it, but that we're making it so that it's fair for everybody. Because I tell you, it makes me crazy to hear somebody sit on one commission, wring their hands that we don't have housing, and then sit on a commission like this and figure out how we're not going to approve something. So I want to make sure that we're good. The mayor from King City, Mike, brought up a point about land outside of the county. Has that ever been done? No. I don't know that we would ever approve that. When he brought it up, I was like, what? Because that never occurred to me. It occurred to me that we would have land not adjacent to a particular city, but that we wouldn't be going into Butte County to get land to mitigate.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure that
It stays in this county.
that it stays in this county. No one's ever talked about it going out of the county. I just wanted to address that. I made a note on it.
So in your opinion, Commissioner, would you like to have that implementation, however it's gonna happen, however those agreements come before us? Would you all agree that that stays with LAFCO?
Yes.
And can you be more specific in your statement?
Option
Really general.
Option A, option A as it's written, keep the timing within the LAFCO process.
Mr. Chair, would it be helpful if I kind of clarify that a little bit, what we're referring to there, or what the way staff is summarizing that recommendation is, and the current practice, or what the practice has been for the last 15 years or so is, and I think Kate may have summarized this as well, but the practice has been that ag mitigation for city annexations of farmland, the ag mitigation that needs to be fully identified prior to the public hearing and discussed at the public hearing, and then fully carried out and put into effect prior to the recordation of the certificate of completion for that annexation, putting that annexation into effect. So in effect, the ag mitigation has to be fully carried out before the annexation is recorded and becomes effective. So the question to the commission, the fundamental question on this issue today to the commission is, does the commission want to uphold that practice? Or completely kind of take that role, that ag mitigation implementation role, and pass that along to the cities? Or I just wanted to mention, here under option B, which is that option of essentially deferring to the city's process to implement ag mitigation requirements, we did include some suggestions that are sort of like a middle ground, where it's not completely as binary of an A/B choice as the way it looks when you first look at this page. We suggested some possible requirements or limitations that the commission could consider making part of its determinations here. We get to that point either today or on another day, but we listed out here some bullet points that talk about as opposed to completely handing off that responsibility to the cities. The commission could do that subject to requiring adoption of a countywide program that all of the cities have agreed to, or adoption of a comprehensive citywide ordinance like the city of Gonzales has done, or the commission could choose this option, but only for annexations within a certain size, a certain acreage or an amount of land that seems to be appropriate for a certain number of years of development or something along those lines, which is kind of consistent actually with some other adopted policies that the commission has, regarding phasing of annexations, or for a limited, the commission could opt to, take this approach of option B, deferring to the city's processes for a limited period of time, kind of like a pilot program for period of several years. Or, and this is the last one I'm going to mention, it's the last bullet point on page 2 of this attachment. We're suggesting that the commission could opt to, hand this role over to the cities, but only in the context of, the application by the city for annexation is going to identify like sort of a first phase of mitigation, and maybe even have that be required to take place as part of the as part of the annexation process. But then the rest of the annexation, or the rest of the mitigation, I should say, the rest of the ag mitigation could take place in phases, over a period of time under the city's process. So it isn't quite as simple of a option A or option B. I mean, those are the two basic choices, but within that option B, there's sort of a range of kind of additional parameters that could be established if the commission does ultimately decide, to take that ag mitigation implementation role and have it be carried out by the cities.
Yeah, I guess my concern right off the bat is if we did phase annexations, Glenn Pace has got 700 acres. We approved the first 100 acres in for annexation. He doesn't get the second 100 or the second 100 acre. You almost have to approve the entire annexation. That way he can go out and size appropriately and build the road infrastructure appropriately for phase 2, 3, 4, 5. But the annexation has to happen. So it's impossible not to do the complete annexation.
So the phasing of mitigation should match the phasing of the
Develop.
project. Yeah.
And if I may, I'd like to make a point.
Sure.
Just generally, and it's not a position of mine, but I think it's important to consider that all this mitigation at the end, if you gotta do it now, the guy with the money, the lady with the money, whoever's got the money that's putting up for the development may say that's too far, I can't do it, forget it. And so inadvertently, we may, and at times, cut off a development that would have provided housing to low income people. But the guy with the money said, I can't do it because you're gonna make me pay all this money up front. And I just throw that out for discussion.
Yeah, that's why the mayor said phase mitigation, but locking in those numbers now, I don't know if that's even possible.
Yeah. I just wanted to put that out for discussion.
So another question, so if LAFCO were to defer some portion of implementation to the cities. And let's just say the city failed to deliver on, to hold the development to the mitigation that was required. Who holds them accountable? Is that something that LAFCO has responsibility to monitor? And what recourse, who has recourse and what recourse exists? In that case, if that were to happen.
I think I'll ask Reed to help on that, but really we have very little enforcement authority. After an annexation, there are really no controls, no formal oversight at all.
Would the public have the ability to come back? Is it a sequel lawsuit? Like who would be harmed by that and who would have the ability to pursue recourse?
It would depend on what exactly the parameters are, right? Is it what kind of a phase ag mitigation? And when you have something like that, what's the written agreement that binds and who binds to what? And those people to that agreement are the people who have legal rights to step in and say, this project isn't following our agreement, and I'm going to sue and get specific performance or injunctive relief to command them to do what they're supposed to. But hypothetically, if we were able to structure it in a way that LAFCO was sort of holding those keys, that would mean that LAFCO would need to initiate legal action against a developer / city to compel them to follow whatever that agreement may be. When that could be a tricky road, depending on how the agreements are or aren't structured. LAFCO may not be a party to those agreements, may not have the ability to step in as a third-party beneficiary. There's maybe some alternative theories, but it's tricky. Which is why the timing issue is a critical one. And that's the part I would say from the legal side, it's very difficult to, as you noted, with the affordable housing, I think I know which one you're talking about, where the back end of the project didn't deliver. That could very realistically be a situation, because what if the developer is no longer solvent at that point, or has cashed out, sold out, bought out, whatever the case may be. So, it's needing to find the balance. You don't want to scare off potential projects, but you also can't, let the clock start the hen house. So you have to have these guidelines.
And I can also see, given the realities that, we're not talking about housing, but really we're talking about housing, right? Like that's the pressure that exists on all of us as decision makers. And I could very quickly and easily see a situation where a city has, made their agreements with the developers. We're going to delay mitigation for ag purposes. And then the narrative and the pressure becomes one that the city, in order to get the housing that, right or wrong, 5,000 square foot home, whatever the narrative in the public will is that you have to put that aside because we want this to happen. So I could very easily imagine a scenario where we don't have any repercussion or recourse in the case where mitigations weren't. So as we talk about what our options are, I think that we have a duty for LAFCO to figure out if we are going to defer some of this. And I get it, right? You guys need, if you've got 8,000 or 800 acres and you're going to do 100 at a time, is there a way for LAFCO to, I guess recording the certification for the annexation would be the final key that we hold, but is there a way for that certification to occur with ongoing payments due? I'm reaching here.
Chair, could I?
Yes.
Darren, thank you for letting me speak. Darren mentioned a companion policy that is part of the commission's adopted policies. And that is, it's basically a policy of this commission that encourages smaller annexations. Say, it doesn't set an acreage, but taking Commissioner Leffel's example, say of 100 acres at a time. What our commission has done over these decades is approve very large annexations. And therefore the mitigation costs for ag mitigation has also become very high. But if the commission enforces its current policy that says annexations should be smaller, then the mitigations then become, the costs go down correspondingly. And it becomes a phased annexation, phased implementation of ag mitigation. That's the way that I think it can work economically. Of course, what we know from the cities and from our development community is that the preference of the cities, the preference of our larger developers is to have an entire property, whether it's 770 acres or 650 acres, that all be brought in at one time. But there's no requirement for LAFCO to continue to allow such large annexations. You can exert your authority with your existing policy that encourages smaller annexations that can reasonably, of course, be foreseen to be developed in the next 5 to 7 years, is what the policy talks about. And basically scale back your approvals so that both the annexations and the mitigations happen at a more measured, more reasonable pace. And that is part of the overall intentions of what our not our ancestors, but our prior commissioners had put in place. Really, is that it's not just ag preservation, but it's this phased approach to annexations. And this commission has a history of approving annexations. Darren and I don't think we have any recollection of this commission, meaning the history of this commission, of an annexation actually being denied. I know that our cities need certainty, our developers need certainty. Once property is brought into the sphere of influence, this commission has 100% track record of keeping its word and being trusted so that future annexations can proceed in a measured way. I hope
I don't know, that December meeting was pretty controversial.
Yep.
Well, I don't wanna go back. Let's keep moving forward.
Right. Marianne?
This is a question for me. So, first of all, with how long it takes just to get something to us, I don't know why anybody would want to do it in 20 or 40 or 50 acres. Because there's no small developer that could afford all of this. It's gonna have to be, it's gotta be big. It's not fair to the cities. But is there a way, like my world, navigational easement, is there a way to put some type of restriction, allow the annexation, but put a restriction on it that will be released as they take down pieces of it? So that it has to come back to make sure that it's within the spirit of how the commission approved it. And the only spirit I'm talking about is they pay an in lieu fee or they find ag land. I'm not trying to tell them where to put a park bench. I just want to make sure that then we would know. And I think somebody brought up a couple of sessions ago that if you look at this, there's no room for a small developer to take a piece, although I guess I'll disagree with that because a large developer can always sell up to a small developer. But to make someone pay for 20 acres are paid for, 500 acres upfront is, with today's prices, that's a big chunk when you know you're not going to develop for 20 years over the whole parcel. So is there a way to do it? You put some type of a deed restriction and then you release it?
I don't believe that that is allowed. I'm not sure there's a legal mechanism that LAFCO could put in place that would bind that. And that's why the timing is such a critical component, because you run into the down the line, what happens and what other way to enforce it. So I don't know of a good way. I can look into it. Obviously I will. I mean, paying close attention here and seeing what your interests are. I would struggle to think of a legally defensible and enforceable is most important way to claw it back and to say, I know that we allowed you to record the annexation. This isn't like a traditional, we're selling property to somebody, we have a right to deed restrict it, or we're allowing them to develop it a certain way, right? It's an annexation, not a development. So it does raise some questions, and that's why this timing component is tricky. I can look at that a little bit more closely for you and see if I can research some clever ways, but my initial gut reaction is that's why this is such a tricky issue. You can't really defer and say, come back in about 10 years, just check in with us and show us that you've satisfied X, Y, Z.
My thing was more to tie it to when they're actually gonna develop it.
Yeah.
So we've already given our approval on that, like our hands are.
I got Mike next here. Mike?
Well, along that same kind of thought process, I don't know if there's a way or a mechanism that you could actually record a lien on the property at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe based on the, I know that the spirit isn't to do the fee in lieu of, but if it was tied somehow to that there was a lien placed on the property tied to the fee in lieu of.
I'd say no, and I would just as a lighten the mood a little bit. I'll note that some of the attorneys in this room had their eyebrows go up at the idea of private property being liened as part of this process, which is a reasonable reaction. And it's not a dumb question, it's not a silly question. We're trying to think outside of the box here and find ways to make this work for the community. So I appreciate that.
Commissioner, Ian.
No, I was just gonna say that part, we're thinking outside the box, so as you go through your research, then we know that we did the best we can, right? So I thought you said it was a way, it's a tricky way that we can do that three-way thing with the cities and the developer to empower the cities to check them 10 years from now and so I don't know if you had an answer now, but that's what I thought I heard you.
Yeah, the reason that the timing component is tricky is it's the same reason my son wants me to leave him in charge of the cookie jar. I promise you, I will only take one following my meal, but I don't believe that when the pressure comes due, that might be his motivation, right? And so if we were to say we're going to defer it to the city, we would be trusting the city and the developer to do what we would like them to do without any ability to enforce it. And if they chose not to, then LAFCO would be sort of sitting there with an empty vessel thinking to itself, didn't get the thing I wanted. Can we bind them future? I have to research that more, but I don't think so.
Well, no, that's fine, but that's what we want. We want a definitive answer,
Yes.
which is we can't.
Yes.
And then, because that's what we have now. That's what I'm hearing now. We have that now, no enforcement. So if you're gonna come back and say, you looked at it, a couple of your peers looked at it, and there's nothing there, then that's the answer.
Okay, our chief of staff, Darren, has me one to add.
Not at all, Jesus. I just wanted to piggyback onto what we were saying, and like from a staff perspective, it seems to me that once the certificate of completion for the annexation is recorded, that ship has sailed, we wouldn't really have any recourse, to kind of bluntly kind of go after the city, for not, if there were a situation where LAFCO doesn't think that the city delivered on what they said they were gonna do with ag mitigation, I don't think there's any real mechanism to do that, but like we are talking about developing guidelines here. These would be implementation guidelines. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but like from a staff perspective, it seems like the guidelines would be saying, in general, the commission intends to defer to the city, to identify what the city plans to do for ag mitigation, and then the expectation is that the city is actually going to do those things. And if for whatever reason, somehow it turns out that doesn't exactly work out to everybody's satisfaction, then maybe that wouldn't necessarily be viewed favorably by LAFCO the next time the same city comes in for an annexation. So, I mean, we are talking about guidelines here where there's some flexibility and, it could be phrased, I think, in such a way that it's sort of an ongoing process where, the city is committing to carrying out this ag mitigation role, but if the commission, years from now thinks that that's not working out well, it seems like the commission could take that back or place restrictions on that.
So
Chair,
the,
if I may.
the very next thing we need to do, we need to decide if we're gonna continue on with this workshop. We've got a couple of commissioners that have to go to another meeting. We have a closed session meeting that we have to get into tonight.
I would say that I'd be willing to allow us to continue it if that's the will of the commission
Oh,
to Monday.
Table,
We do have
Monday.
time.
Okay,
closed session.
perfect. Didn't know it was so much.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. There's been moved and second to push off our closed session, so that'll give us at least another half an hour to decide, everybody think about our next workshop meeting and what their dates look like. Okay.
You wanna make a roll call vote?
What's that?
Are we gonna do a roll call vote on?
Yeah, I thought there was a question on the motion. Was there a question on the motion? Okay.
Do we need a roll call? Can we just need it?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. So our closed session is now pushed off.
I just had,
Consultant.
thank you, I just had a question just on the, looking at the different options that we have before us and the conversation about the cities. So the city of Gonzales already has an ordinance in terms of ag mitigation, so, part of the discussion today also is, is there a possibility to look at having, and I don't know if the cities can even approve, if this board can even approve the city's ordinance, but looking at the city's ordinance and that we review somehow to make sure that they are consistent with what the policy of LAFCO is, and being able to empower the cities to be able to provide an ordinance that does keep in the spirit of meeting some of the flexibility that we have within our policy. And if the cities can include language in terms of if the project does not move forward or doesn't meet the criteria, that the cities can have that enforcement capacity, and what would that and how would we determine that that's feasible, and what the cities, the cities can put in more of the enforcement mechanisms and we can. So is there a possibility to look at the cities having an ordinance like Gonzales, and does that meet some of the criteria of what we're talking about to be able to enforce some of those mitigation ratios and timing, giving the cities the flexibility to be able to move forward?
Is it okay to speak?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, any more discussion on the timing and implementing?
That was a question. Sorry, that was a question.
No.
So can you
You want to-
help me answer that? Like, would
Yeah.
that even be a possibility for a discussion item?
I think that's what's been sort of presented is, don't worry about it. It will run through the local agencies, ag mitigation ordinance, whenever they break ground. And that's what sort of has been proposed, is say, don't do anything about ag mitigation, LAFCO. We'll take it when it comes due. That runs into the problems that I think were raised is, today, the ordinance says one thing. We're two city councils meetings away from that ordinance saying something different, or an exemption existing to carve out any development while the city's short on green and numbers, or anything else, right? A specific development project could be exempted. So you could, but that kind of is going back towards the saying, we're going to kind of advocate our role, we're going to let somebody else do it, and we're going to trust the right thing, and we'll see what happens. So it is one of the proposals that's been out there, but it takes that out of LAFCO's role. There's essentially no role to play other than to say, we hope and wish that this will happen in a good way at some time in the future. And we don't know what the rules that will be applied in the future are because the ordinance today does not bind the project that you're looking at.
But we had MOUs with cities before, and those MOUs.
Those were specific to the sphere areas or the boundary
And the
areas.
mitigation ratios, I mean, for most of our cities, they had that, like, so that worked.
And so when city and county had an MOU saying this is going to be the proposed mitigation ratio, then the developer would come in knowing what that was. And they would be able to make a proposal that was processed by LAFCO. And so if the cities and counties also, I don't know where they are at this point, so I'm gonna have to inform you about where they are on their back and forth on various negotiations on that. But were they to reach updated MOUs, then the MOUs could serve as the groundwork for the proposals that would come to LAFCO. So you wouldn't have to defer it and say, oh, okay, go ahead. We know there's an MOU for the future to deal with it. The MOU would deal with it today. It would allow it to be its closure. It allows you to get closure on the question of what's going to be done.
Mayor.
Yeah, quickly, I'm trying to get back to Commissioner Scher's about either or, you know, do we turn over? You know, I don't really that word advocate, that's not it, we choose to do whatever we choose to do. But there's no middle ground, there's no gray area where we can keep something to hold them accountable.
This is where we get into the upper of the problem.
No, I just want to say, I don't know if that's a different way of wording the same question we've been asking. But that's what I'm trying to get you is how do I support that ideal of somewhere in the middle, but we were holding something to make sure it happens the way it says will happen.
And so LAFCO's sort of piece that you heard Darren mention is reporting the certificate of compliance. And prior to that, LAFCO makes determinations and findings. And so once LAFCO, so that's where you would put it all in. And that's where LAFCO does put it all in. It says before we record this, you have to satisfy X, Y, and Z. And so you could write in there, in the future, you must satisfy ag mitigation, period. And you could record it. You wouldn't be able to enforce it, number one. And number two, what does that get interpreted to mean in the future by the local agency that's going to be processing it?
Okay.
You would. So we see it.
Yes.
So I guess I'm giving the discussion and the questions and whereas I would love us to be able to find some middle ground, I'm not comfortable giving up the LAFCO authority on this. So unless you can research this and come back, I would ask that you research this. You know, is there some way to do like a partial certificate of completion or certificate of completion for like portion? I'm just like, if there's a creative way to address the concerns that have been raised while maintaining the legal standing of LAFCO to uphold, I think our duty to, prime duty to protect our, whoever said the fourth largest ag economy in the country, and ensure and to pull our Knox-Hertzberg requirements. I think we have a duty to ensure that any ag mitigations that need to happen, that they do happen. If there's a way to do that that works for the cities in a more phased approach while maintaining our legal standing, I would be open to that, but I can't give up our legal standing. I wouldn't be supportive of that. All right.
So that's kind of what I was proposing earlier, and I'm kind of thinking about it, read kind of like a it's like a construction loan where you prove that you did this and then you get that. There's got to be a way to record, let the annexation go through, but to record where it comes back. And that we could put guidelines, like it has to be 20% of the project at least at one time. So it's not coming back for 10 acres, 20 acres, but have it where it's a significant amount. So the staff isn't dealing with it forever. But there has to be a way to be able to do it. I do not, because I agree, you're one election away from a complete council change. And you're 2 council meetings away from an ordinance change. So you cannot, we would be, I think, giving up all of what LAFCO stands for. If we just said, okay, fine, just go do whatever and we'll see you whenever we see you.
So we do have a consensus.
If we can come up with something where we can do it in tranches, where we can figure out a way that we can do it. I get what Soledad's going through. They've got all this acreage approved, but they cannot find. And we put more roadblocks on a couple of months ago going, oh, wait, now we want to see this or that. And I read what the planning commission had, and I see very clearly that they have some pretty good roadblocks in theirs to keep people from building. So, I mean, I would like to see us as a county provide for everybody. That is who I am. I live in a very nice house in Monterey. I like to drive through the Salinas Valley and see all that open space. It's beautiful. But I believe that people have a living to get. And I want to say this, there are a lot of people that live in agricultural communities who work at Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital. They work for the county. They work for the movie theater. They work for a bank. This housing thing is not about agricultural housing. It is about providing for families in the diversification of jobs and places for people to go. We heard somebody said that they make $124,000 a year and they can't afford to buy a house. Okay, this is for everybody. This isn't, I don't want to get us stuck on one segment of the population, because then we're saying people in Salinas, you just keep on doing ag and we'll just provide just a little. So that's not who we are either. So we are a whole county and we have to work together on it.
But we do have exemptions that we can provide as part of our regulatory provisions. So, you know, I'm glad that you're for all. I'm saying, I know that our responsibility as this commission is to be looking at everyone as well. But I also want to make sure that I say that I know within our Salinas Valley cities that don't live in the peninsula, that the majority of our families, even though they may work in the Salinas Valley or Monterey, their, you know, median household income for our city is 66,000. And the homes are 700,000. They're not affordable. They're not affordable. So I think it's looking at the housing that's needed for all, but for those that have been systematically left out of the system and that can't afford and that live here and that work for this valley and have made Monterey County the fourth largest, you know, economic engine in the county. I think it's really important for us to also be looking at that.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to make sure that we're looking for, that we're not trying to make it narrow. That's all I'm saying.
So can we frame, where we are with this first discussion area, on the implementing? Are we looking at keeping, with our LAFCO and not letting the cities grab a hold of this thing? Do we have a consensus there?
No,
No.
we thought we were gonna wait for a better answer to what could be. Go ahead, Supervisor Church.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're on either keeping as is A, unless we see how people test reads the skills here and he comes up with a magic solution. That'll allow some little variation on what I understand. And if we can't make a decision, say the rest of the agree.
Okay. So I just want a direction to make sure.
I mean, I can say very clearly, I'm not comfortable giving up the authority of LAFCO. And so if there's a way to do it for LAFCO to maintain the authority while giving more flexibility in the city, I could support that. But otherwise, I'm not. And I'm
on the same page with that too, but I'm willing to see.
Well, I'm on the same page too.
Me too.
Right? I think we all are. But
I just want to be really clear. I want to be very explicit. It's not saying like whatever you come up with, and then we'll come back to the discussion table. It's either we come up with something or I'm on option A.
We're obviously having another workshop. We're gonna hear back from Reed on our first discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if he comes up with, he said that there's some good compromise, then we all have decisions to make. None of us want, I'm not supporting human power.
Great. Okay, on discussion area number 2, methods of implement. You know, we had several speakers get up and talk about the in lieu fees. Where's everybody at with the conservation easements? Can we have some discussion about that? Let's let Darren.
We're on page 2 of attachment 2. This is discussion area number 2, called methods of implementing agricultural mitigation requirements. There is broken into three subsections, 2A, 2B, and 2Z. And the first one, 2A, is the question of how mitigation should be provided. And by that, we mean what type of mitigation is the commission going to be looking for as part of these design guidelines or policy implementation guidelines. And the suggested wording or the staff's recommendation here for the wording that we're recommending that the commission consider is again, this is just like all of these, it's phrased in terms of generally preferred, and in general it should be this, and in general it should be that, because these are guidelines. But the recommendation from staff is that conservation easements are generally preferred, and again, this is consistent with the current practice. So dedication of permanent conservation easements on specific sites and handing those over to a qualified third party, a conservation entity, a land trust, is generally preferable to payment of in lieu fees. But there is that option of in lieu fees, and like Kate had mentioned earlier, we've only had it occur once in the LAFCO process, but it has happened before. That is an option that's available. And staff's recommendation is that, keeping with this general wording, if what is being proposed in any given instance is payment of in lieu fees, then LAFCO would have the discretion to require applicants to document what they've done as far as a good faith effort to secure conservation easements before kind of going to payment of in lieu fee as the option if suitable conservation easements aren't available. And then lastly, the last sentence here in this option A is that the commission may also consider other possible alternative methods of achieving ag mitigation on a case-by-case basis. Methods other than conservation easements or in lieu fees, but again, that's staff's recommendation. It is something that we are attempting to present here as general wording with some flexibility, possible as annexation proposals come along, but this is what staff would suggest.
Discussion. Supervisor?
Yeah. My general position is we haven't done in lieu fees a lot in the past. I'm not a big fan of in lieu fees. In lieu fees are being used because you can't find a suitable conservation easement. How are paying in lieu fees going to suddenly find that? So the same problem exists whether if in lieu fees are being paid or not in that case, if that's the problem. So I don't see that's really a solution. And so I'm just uncomfortable with in lieu fees. I think we need to tweak things so that the ag land can be found and put aside, or else we ought to tweak it again. We got to do something with that. In lieu fees are not doing anything for ag land application outside of perhaps having less money and less land being put aside. Because if the land can be found now, maybe it's going to take 5 or 10 years. That money isn't going to put aside. Isn't going to be able to put aside less land.
Any other discussion?
So if we can't find land now, don't do the development.
You find out what the problem is that's going on. Taking in lieu fees isn't going to solve it down the line. But if there's a problem, you can't find land now, then we have a systemic problem, and that needs to be addressed.
But the in lieu fees solves the problem.
No, it doesn't solve the problem on.
It absolutely does. It moves the development forward to build.
But it doesn't, but we're here for preserving for ag land too, and that's not getting that part.
But you're talking about Salinas Valley cities. I mean, if you want to talk about agricultural and land and how important it is, the Salinas Valley cities are the ones that are most impacted by that. Most of the Salinas Valley cities, agricultural land in general is critical for our city of Salinas to make sure that we take care of the ag land. However, we also have state requirements and a shortage of housing, and the in lieu fees helps build that land, but we do it in the sense of responsibility of making sure that it's within the area and what's annexed to build.
Mayor, you're not listening to what I'm saying, is that if there's a problem where somebody can't find the land now, and lieu fees isn't gonna solve the problem down the line. I'm saying you got a problem, then you gotta go back and look at this
And that's,
and see where your problem is.
And that's what I
the
wanna
parts
ask
you can go for.
and that's what I wanna ask you. Does that mean the application can come before us to try to see what the problem is? Or when a developer, you know, they look at it and they say, well, we can't find it, and they have to make a good faith effort, right? But we can't find it. Can they still put an application in, or are we saying, don't even come to it because it has to be, one for one?
We gotta look at it,
That's
that's
what
what we're trying to do is we don't just turn something down, we look at things, look at what we can do.
I think the other discussion point also has been not just enough. I mean, there's suitable land that has been found or land that has been found, but there's still questions in terms of water. There's still, all these questions that we had the last time. So I guess in terms of the flexibility also, if there's land and the land is identified, then, how are we proceeding with that? The land has been identified. Is it the best land? Maybe not, but it is land. So can that project move forward with that? Just with the identification of, it is a piece of land. We are,
It's like we're trying to keep flexibility and has been talked about.
Sure. Okay.
I
Discussion?
agree that we should keep as much flexibility as possible, and I don't particularly like it lieu fees either, but I wouldn't want to just shut them off completely and say, no, don't come to us, don't even talk to us about it.
Yeah, I agree. Commissioner Look?
I would just say that sometimes you might ask me, do I wanna sell today? And I go, nope. But I die and my kids are like, give me the money. So if there are in lieu fees in a fund, that land may be purchased 10 years from now, when I'm no longer gonna do it, but my kids wanna
I
have it.
agree 100%. I was thinking.
And that's the
Going down that route,
benefit
too.
of in lieu fees for me. It gives people like Del Piero back here the opportunity to keep talking to people and looking, is he still back? To be able to keep looking and find land that can be purchased.
And or the in lieu fees, but if it's gonna be 10 years from now, that land's gonna be more expensive as well too. So this is what I'm bringing up, that you're gonna have to be flexible. I don't care for the in lieu fees, as others have said, but maybe it can be tweaked in a way that'll work in those extreme circumstances, but I don't know what the instance we had. Could we get clarification on the ones that came up, that used the lieu fees and why that happened there?
Yes, of course, Commissioner, that the instance was about a 35-acre annexation to the city of Greenfield. And in that case, I think it was just kind of impractical to go out and find 35 or 50 or 70 acres.
Because it was too small.
It was too small. And so, the value was set for what that conservation easement would have been worth. Or the value was set for the cost of,
There was an appraisal, that calculated the conservation easement value on that site at that particular time, which was about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was only about $5,000 or $7,000 per acre at that time in that location, and that's what was agreed to among the property owner, the city, the county, and the Accident Trust. That's what was agreed to, and that was the most practical solution in that particular instance, and that's what the property owner requested to do, and that was agreeable, and that's the one time that has been what the property owner has requested as part of an annexation for ag mitigation as part of a LAFCO annexation process.
We need to get our next meeting scheduled. Is there any thought? Obviously, I think we have a consensus. We're gonna continue this work. I think we're finding some good commonality here on getting this forward. If everybody can pull out their calendar, our next LAFCO meeting is.
we have one a week from now.
Yes, that's Monday.
And then we have one on January 22nd. Those are our next two
So,
regular meetings.
so the 4th of December, would anybody entertain starting that meeting earlier and getting 3 or 4 hours of workshop in before that meeting? Or
I have a in this room just prior, that we could probably change that meeting, but.
okay.
Here on board that morning.
Yeah, the rest of December. Is anybody opposed to moving it to the first of the year?
So on the fourth, how big is, you have a very big agenda.
Probably about an hour or hour and a half.
The question is whether we want to do the workshop a little bit later, as Supervisor Lopez pointed out. We're not being very accessible to a lot of people who are working out in the community. So the question, we have a meeting is at 3. Could we start a workshop at 5?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to dig at it another hour or so, whatever you guys agree, but I agree with taking another stab at it, not trying to get it all done, not from 5 to 9, but an hour here, you know, till we can find another special meeting time.
So is anybody opposed to going on the December 4th? And we'll pick it up right after our meeting. Our meeting starts at 3.
Starts at 3.
Starts at 3. So would anybody be opposed on going from 4, let's say 4 to 6 on the 6th or the 4th, excuse me?
May I make a recommendation that we don't set an end time, because I think this is clearly a popular topic and I want to make sure that we're able to get through as much as we can for as long as we're willing.
I mean, if people are gonna leave, when they leave, we should know when we wanna.
Does anybody have a meeting that they have to go to on that day? I guess that's the first question, because I know we have people that have water meetings or something that,
Not that.
but you don't have it. So we don't, none of us have like, we have to be someplace else at 6 o'clock.
So let's have our regular agenda item at 3.
Sorry.
Our regular agenda at 3, and then we'll just move right into our workshop.
And we'll do closed session first, so we get it out of the way. At 3,
I'll verify our.
but that way people don't have to they can understand they don't have to be there at 3 o'clock.
Do you have your right floor?
I would recommend that we say, even if we don't put an end time, I think we do want to put, after this time, we're not gonna go past this time. I mean, I don't want to be here till 11 o'clock at night. I think it's important to be able to have a discussion where we say, we're not going beyond.
So 4 to 7. Cut it off at some.
Say 4 to 9.
Let's get it done. I mean.
Yeah, a little more, yeah, so we know we have a time limit, we wanna make sure we're ready, prepared.
Okay.
I'm just concerned of whether or not between closed session and regular agenda, we can get all done 3 to 4. And that's our.
We'll move it as quickly as we can.
We have motivation.
Yeah, and I do have a kind of a procedural question. Right now, the regular meeting is set for downstairs at the Board of Supervisors chambers. Is the commission comfortable continuing this workshop discussion in the board chambers? Are you okay?
Yeah, we should.
Probably more comfortable.
And the public can come down. I mean, you're here, but.
So I have another procedural question. Typically, you close the public hearing when you're bringing it back for discussion. Are we gonna just leave this open for another whole round of the public?
It's a workshop, it's not a public hearing.
No,
So-
I know, but the public's coming, because we are gonna make some decisions.
Oh, I was just gonna note that there's no need to open and close like a public hearing, like an adoption of a rate increase or anything along those lines. We allow public comment as part of every meeting that we have. And so next Monday will be public comment and people can comment on items on or off the agenda. So people will have an opportunity to fire it back up and share their thoughts.
See you all again.
Even though we have already spoken.
Yeah. Could we have maybe the public comment at the end of our meeting?
It's within the discretion of the chair and the commission to kind of structure that. It can be free flowing, it can be reopened. You can say we wanna
we solicit some comments since we've got everybody here and open it back up. You can do whatever you want to allow that to be a good community process.
That's why I was gonna ask the chair if you can start up comment by saying, hey, make sure you wanna talk about this, that's what you want to talk about. And then, I don't know, are we close to leaving now? I was just gonna say, I thought we were pretty close to consensus on that item we were talking about. I don't know if we want to start on that, but. Why, I didn't think we wanted to turn it over.
The only reason I would say that is we have county staff that actually technically have to go at 5 to close this room down and shut it down. And so I know they're saying like anyone would debate them, but.
All right.
I'll move adjournment and continuing this public.
All right.
That's fun. The next one.
Okay, second.
Grab a cookie. It's a lot of cookies.